The day I discovered a dead fish flopping in my toilet was the exact moment I realized the HOA had officially declared war. At first, I assumed it was a disgusting prank or some freak wildlife mishap. That is, until I turned on the kitchen faucet and was greeted by nothing but a wheeze and the sad clank of dry pipes. My cattle troughs were empty, my tomatoes sagging like they'd been hexed, and even the dogs were eyeing the bird bath as if it were sacred treasure. Still half asleep and annoyed, I yanked on my boot shaft tied and stomped outside to investigate. That's when I spotted it. A crisp, white envelope taped to my fence post, standing there like some passive-aggressive monument to bureaucratic nonsense. The paper was watermarked with the HOA seal, and the message inside hit me like a sucker punch: water access suspended pending compliance with HOA green space regulations. Thank you for your cooperation. No warning. No meeting. No chance to appeal. Just like that, they'd cut me off as if I were some squatter instead of the legal owner of the 20-acre ranch my family had worked since 1957. I stormed down to the HOA office, my boots kicking up dust with every determined step. The place reeked of lemon polish and the unmistakable scent of Karen Templeton's overly sweet perfume. Karen, president of the HOA, queen of passive aggression and self-declared defender of suburban order, sat behind her oversized desk like she was running the Pentagon. Her yard, mind you, had a koi pond, a fountain, and more water features than a Vegas hotel. When I asked her what authority the HOA had to cut off my water, she gave me the smirk of a raccoon caught red-handed in the henhouse. "You're within HOA boundaries," she purred, "and your yard fails to meet the green space guidelines. The bylaws are very clear." I stared at her, caught between laughter and rage. "Did you personally measure my green space compliance with your little tape measure?" I asked. She didn't flinch. Just slid a glossy pamphlet across the desk: "Landscaping Harmony for a Brighter Tomorrow." By the time I got home, it was clear this wasn't about landscaping. Karen had been angling to buy the land next to mine for her so-called community recreation annex. But my property stood in her way. Cutting off my water wasn't about rules, it was about pressure. But what Karen didn't count on was just how stubborn I could be. I called my buddy Curtis. The man owed me from the night I hauled his truck out of a snowdrift back in '99. Curtis had gone off-grid years ago and now made a living installing solar arrays and rainwater systems for eco-ranchers and apocalypse preppers alike. When I told him what Karen had pulled, he just let out a low whistle. "Well, Wade," he said, "sounds like it's time to shove a little sunlight down their pipes." We met that night in my barn and sketched out our plan on the back of a feed sack. A solar-powered pump, underground water storage, private irrigation lines, all legal, all within my deeded land, and all off the HOA's grid. With 2 beers and a headlamp between us, we started digging. While Karen and her board smugly watched drone footage, convinced they were starving me out, Curtis and I were laying down the roots of a rebellion. Every pipe we laid was a quiet act of defiance. Every wire we connected was one less way they could control me. 2 days into the project, Karen rolled up in her golf cart, her giant sunglasses covering half her face and her clipboard clutched like a weapon. "Are you ready to cooperate?" she asked, peering at my land like she could sniff out trouble. "Absolutely," I replied with a smile, handing her a fake blueprint I'd drawn with crayon that featured birdbaths and regulation height shrubs. She looked it over solemnly, clearly pleased with herself, and buzzed away. By the following week, my solar pump was online, pulling fresh water from the aquifer beneath my property straight to my crops and livestock. Meanwhile, I'd done a little legal homework of my own. Turns out, the HOA didn't actually own the water rights, they leased them. And that lease was expiring in less than 6 weeks. Guess who put in a bid on that lease? I kept my mouth shut, didn't brag, didn't challenge. Sometimes the best revenge is silence. The next morning, coffee in hand, I walked my land, stopping at each newly filled trough, each perky tomato plant. The pump hummed like a content old dog under the morning sun. No cease and desist letters. No permits denied. No HOA fingerprints on anything. I had power now. Not just the kind that kept my plants alive, but the kind that came from refusing to be strangled by someone else's grip. It didn't take long for Karen to notice. She showed up a few days later, heels stabbing into the gravel, clipboard ready. "I hear there's construction on your property," she snapped. "Construction within HOA common areas needs approval," I replied calmly. "Good thing this isn't one." She narrowed her eyes, grasping at any regulation that might stick. It's still subject to neighborhood visibility standards and community aesthetics. I gestured toward my wide-open pasture, nothing visible but blue sky and grazing cattle. Which part bothers you most, the cows or the clouds? Cornered, she changed tactics. If you're willing to cooperate, she offered, we might consider reinstating your water privileges. Perhaps if you let us host the spring festival on your ranch. That's when I knew she was nervous. Karen didn't negotiate. She commanded. Send me the offer in writing, I said sweetly. What she didn't know was that I had already planned my next move. And I wasn't the mouse in this game. Curtis and I spent the next few weeks making the system bulletproof. Decoy tanks here, diversion valves there, all tucked away beneath innocent-looking flower beds. Everything legal, everything mine. The invitation to co-host the spring festival came on official HOA letterhead. What Karen didn't notice was the small clause I added stating that any damage or resource use on my property during the event would be compensated at full commercial rates. The board approved the letter without a second glance. Festival day arrived with all the pomp you'd expect from a suburban event that had more budget than sense. SUVs and golf carts paraded in, kids running wild, residents posing for Instagram photos with my livestock. Karen floated around in a pastel jumpsuit, directing the chaos like a general at war. But then, mid-afternoon, the real fun began. The portable toilets stopped working. The sprinklers in the HOA-maintained garden sputtered, then died. Faucets in the refreshment tent gurgled uselessly. Karen frantically jabbed at her phone, trying to reboot the smart water system. But nothing happened. What she didn't know was that Curtis and I had discovered a root-choked section of their old water line running through my easement. Completely legal, completely outside their control. Nature had done the damage, I just let it happen. By late afternoon, with guests overheating and the garden wilting, I casually suggested to the mayor that he take a tour of my independent water system. The man perked up like I'd offered him a golden ticket. I showed him the solar panels, the humming pump, the gleaming storage tanks. All off-grid, I explained. All fully compliant. No HOA strings attached. Karen's face twisted like she'd bitten into a lemon. The mayor was impressed. Guests were asking questions. Some even clapped. Karen snapped. This is sabotage. You're humiliating me in front of the mayor. I shook my head slowly. You shut off my water. I adapted. That's not sabotage, that's survival. The damage was done. The HOA's facade crumbled in real time, their mismanagement laid bare. Whispers turned to questions. Questions turned to demands for accountability. It didn't stop there. Karen, in a last-ditch effort, filed complaints against my system. But the county inspector, a sharp woman named Lynn, came out, checked my permits, and left satisfied. Before she went, though, Lynn spotted something fishy at the HOA clubhouse. An unregistered water line snaking straight into Karen's backyard. The investigation that followed uncovered more than Karen could hide. Unauthorized plumbing, misallocated funds, shady landscaping, invoices, the works. By the time the audit was done, half the board had resigned and Karen was forced out entirely. Meanwhile, I secured the water rights lease. For the next 10 years, I'd control the water they once tried to weaponize against me. But I didn't hoard it. I offered fair rates to anyone who wanted independence from the HOA grid. No politics. No bullying. Just water. Karen moved out, tail tucked. The koi pond? Drained by board order. The fine? Came straight out of her pocket. Peace settled over the neighborhood. People waved again. They asked about solar pumps and rainwater collection instead of HOA gossip. The mayor stopped by to shake my hand. The new board president, Erlene, a retired teacher with more sense than flash, sat down on my porch one morning with sweet tea and a plan for real community water solutions. And me? I kept that first HOA notice, the one taped to my fence, tucked away in a drawer, right next to the lease paperwork. Because every time I see it, I remember the day they tried to choke me out and how I learned to breathe deeper instead.